I'm Lucy Chung. I'm the CEO and co-founder of NOBL. We're an organizational design firm, and I'm joined by...
Hi, I'm Jane Garza. I'm the managing director of NOBL LA.
So today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're actually going to share an edited deck that we shared internally. We basically put a presentation together for our internal team to go through what we felt like was the best way to respond to the economic impact of COVID-19. And then after we presented it, we got so much kind of interesting and substantive feedback from our teams, but also from partners and roommates and others that overheard the conversation or were told about it, that it was valuable. And so this is a bit of an experiment for us, but we figured we would sort of create something that we could publish online.
Yeah, and this is not going to include, we have changed it a bit to be public facing. So obviously it doesn't include all of our numbers and our important information, but I think the key is that it's a template that someone can just download, and not even download, just copy and use from Google Slides. Because we know a lot of leaders are at the stage where they have to communicate something to their people. People are hearing about layoffs every single day. They're wondering about every company's strength and financial strength, and this is one way to start communicating that information. So we hope that it would give leaders some outline of what can they actually do and what should they be communicating and thinking about when they got to their employees.
Yeah, so a couple notes and then we'll get into it. We're not going to do a whole lot of voiceover beyond this introduction. Is probably the longest that we'll do. Is one, this is very pared down from a design aesthetic standpoint. That's because this is internal and we don't prioritize doing design for design's sake when the content is the more important thing to get across. The other reason is that we have a really sort of distinct domains in terms of managing the brand and managing the site and what we publish versus managing the economic engine and the commercial piece of the business, or the economic piece of the business. And so when we do that, we make sure that we don't kind of let those domains bleed. Does that do that justice, Jane? I feel like maybe there's a better way to explain that, but.
No, I think that's perfect. I think that helps explain why this is in this format. It's about the information and not the design of the information.
Yeah, so that's why it's just black and white. It's pretty simple. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we added this slide for the purposes of this. This is really just communicating in a crisis. We borrowed this from, if you've seen any stuff on our conference, our Change at Work conference, we spoke to a few leaders that we felt like gave some really nice nuggets around how to lead through uncertainty. So that's what this is. I would also say the give the facts one is the one I would call out to say that if you haven't been transparent as a leader in the past, and you want to use this moment to be fully transparent, and honestly, this internal deck is going to orient towards full transparency, because we basically are transparent about every single thing except salary data. We believe that's a private piece of data, but everything else we're really transparent about. That said, if you have not already been a company that does that, right? So you've never shared the numbers on a P&L, or you've never really shared revenue goals or any of those things, it's fine to decide that this is the moment to do that, but it does require upskilling around acumen and context and empowering that information to be, or enabling that information to be empowering, because transparency without that can actually cause anxiety and more confusion and disengagement, rather than the intended effect of more of that. So that's just, I would say, almost like please try this at home. We're not saying don't try it, but please, we really want to caveat that with, you do need to provide the skills to understand the data for your employees.
Right. And I remember one leader once was talking about one-way doors or two-way doors. I think that's a pretty common example, right? There's a one-way decision door where once you've made that decision, you can't go backwards. And then there's two ways where we can make the decision, but we can always go backwards and roll it back in. Anything around transparency is a one-way door. So once you share salary data, you cannot go backwards. Once you share this level of transparency, you can't suddenly reel it back in and stop. Right. So just be careful about what your current level of transparency is, and don't jump 4 levels. Jump one level, exactly right. Or stay where you are. And
that's empathic. Okay too. That's empathic, by the way. That's a way of practicing empathy. So that's this slide. It's really just communicating in a crisis. What are your best practices? Here's our title slide. This was our COVID response. We clarified our priorities. So we made really clear that we were prioritizing health first, and then economic security. And so what the health prioritization looks like is just ensuring that we were leaving loudly and setting boundaries. That's definitely been a big one, which I think we're going to post something about, is how do you set boundaries in a virtual, fully remote team? Luckily, we've been fully remote and globally distributed forever. So COVID did not introduce necessarily a need for new rituals around going remote. It introduced a need for new rituals around just prioritizing physical and mental well-being. We could do more on this. I think we really are thinking about more and more how to put these measures in place, but I thought this priority slide was important.
Yeah, and I think if you're not already thinking about it in this way, we really encourage that you do. I know there are a lot of leaders who are being empathetic and thoughtful about the physical and mental health aspect of just like living in a pandemic. I know some others that are pushing priority or pushing like speed of work and dedication to work above all else. And it just is an unfair push, right? You're asking people to decide between their own health and security, their time with their family, their kids who are running around at home, wiping down their groceries, all those things versus like getting the work done. So just be careful about what you're asking people to prioritize and think hard about what is number one for you.
Then we outlined the challenge that we were facing. Jane, anything on this one that we want to call up?
I don't think so. This is so personal to NOBL, but you'll have to think about what it is for you, right? What has COVID brought up for you? What has been kind of the shock or the thing that you really need to think about seriously? Put that into this list so that everyone is on the same page of these are our current challenges that we're going to work around for the next foreseeable future.
Yep. Then we really got into what are we doing about it? So we sort of delineated between defensive measures that were really about protecting the business and things we were going to do to deal with what we have. And then there were offensive levers about gaining more and growth. And so we actually put these in order of prioritization in terms of what we were going to do first and what we felt like was, the best thing to put first in terms of our process. And then the offensive levers we'd already really put in place, and I think there's another slide on that one a little bit later, but.
Yeah. And I think I found having this side by side really important. Again, our offensive list is pared down here for the public view, but I do think it's important for you to think about both, because often people are going to walk away a little bit helpless from this conversation. Like, okay, we're struggling. What can I do about it? And giving them a list of, here are the things that you should be thinking about, like reduce your spending, but also do these very active out in the market things that can help us in the next few months. Maybe it's learn a new skill. Maybe it's start to tap into a specific community or network, what have you, whatever makes sense for your organization.
Yeah, and then I think something to call out here is number 8 says layoffs. We actually had a really interesting, so we didn't say this, but the way that this came together is that Bud put kind of a first spin, Bud being our co-founder and chief strategy officer, put a first pass on this, then I took a deeper pass, and then all the location leads, so each of the managing directors in each of our cities took another pass on it. And we had a really rich discussion about whether or not to really call out layoffs in this way. Because layoffs do cause so much anxiety, and honestly for us, because it had actually not been a decision that we had even started to explore, because we didn't feel like we were going to need to. We were in the very fortunate position of being flush for cash for the time being, to an extent that we didn't feel like we were going to do it tomorrow or next month or even the month after. And so we decided we wanted to err on the side of transparency and really own the fact that it is in fact on this list. The other thing that we realized is that we really don't have any entry level employees. All of our employees are sort of seasoned people who've been in the workforce. Now, that's something that right now our business needs. It's possible that 5 years from now we'll be able to hire more of an entry level swath, but our business demands that everyone is capable of running a client engagement and owning client relationships. And so because of that, there's a level of professional maturity that we felt like could handle hearing that this is on our list, and also would assume it's on the list even if it wasn't. And so that was our decision. That decision is not for everyone, but I think we really had, I thought, quite a healthy but also intense conversation about how to put that on the list, how to talk about it. I think the other thing we realized is that a couple of our employees have actually been through layoffs that have been quite painful and have left some scar tissue. And so we felt like this might be a moment for healing just a little bit of that in being so upfront about it. And it went well. It went over really well. We got great feedback about the fact that it was healing, and it was important that that was called out. So we really made the call.
Yeah, so I think learn from that is have the tough conversations. Don't let the elephants in the room remain elephants before you share this with the rest of your staff. And we did a lot of pre-morteming. We were like, what could go wrong? How might people respond, and how will we respond as a result? That doesn't mean to say like, oh, people might react intensely, so let's not share anything. It's let's continue to share, but how will we respond when we get, a tough question? I think the thing too that I find important about this slide is if you're in HR, if you're a leader of a person right now, you're likely getting the question of, are we looking at layoffs, if you haven't already, just because they're everywhere right now. We're hearing about layoffs and furloughs every day at new organizations. And most of the time, people only know that as the lever for protecting a company. If you're not at a leadership, finance, HR level, right? The number one lever an employee goes to is like, uh-oh, my job is at stake. But you can see in this list, there are a lot of other options for us before we get there.
That's such a good point. You're right.
Yeah, and so this is that opportunity to help them see, like you're kind of helping them see the same horizon that you see. Just level them up a little bit and help them understand that there's a lot of other options and how those options line up until lever, or that layoff lever in particular.
I have another point on that, but I'm going to save it for a later slide. So then we did a little bit on timelining, because we wanted to be clear that not everything had even been, a timeline hadn't been put in, and also the status of it. So, we put in that we were already cutting unnecessary expenses, but layoffs, it was to be determined.
Yeah.
Anything else on that one? I'll get to the next one.
I would say if you're in an extreme situation, if layoffs are imminent, if people know that you're a startup and you might be struggling for cash, that kind of thing, I would say this is a slide to also share how much runway does each of these levers give you.
Yes.
So, and you can be as transparent as you want here. You can get really specific about the dates, or you can just say like, this gives us approximately this. It's kind of up to you to make that decision. But I do think it helps people understand, okay, so levers 1, 2, and 3 will get us through the summer, and then hopefully by then, we'll have more clients, what have you, and kind of tell the story of what path this takes you down.
Then we got into a little more detail on the offensive levers. That's self-explanatory. And then we got into the specifics. Obviously here, what we've done is not been fully transparent with the public about what our actual numbers are and what months we're looking at. But I think what we did internally was actually have the cash numbers on this, and also the months. And our monthly burn rate, et cetera. And so, where we were going to be in a kind of more dire situation. A couple notes here. One is that we're all equity holders in the business, which is something we're public about. So everyone is a business owner. And so part of Jane's point about that list of levers is we're prioritizing treating everyone like they own a P&L and like they own a business. And so having all of those levers and having everyone look at that, that type of horizon was something that we felt like was really important, is to treat everyone like they were sitting at the helm of a business and running it. That's one thing that we want to note on this slide. The other one that I want to note is that this was a very conservative view. And so we sort of did a little bit of education for the team around the fact that this was the worst case scenario, basically, where this acted like we won no additional work. This acted like we collect nothing that's outstanding. In other words, all clients default, right? So, and that we never send any additional invoices that may have already been committed to. We got a couple questions like, well, what's the non-conservative version of this look like? And I think, we said, hey, we can definitely look at the spreadsheet that feeds this. And we, our COO had created, and the person who kind of runs our finances created a really nice model to do that. So we could toggle in and out of these levers and really look at that, which we were going to do at a kind of later stage. But I made it clear for this conversation that I didn't want to do that I actually really wanted us to think about the worst case scenario, because it actually wasn't so bad. It would have been different if our worst case scenario was awful and was going to mean imminent layoffs, but because our worst case scenario was actually like a pretty decently rosy picture considering the circumstances, and I was feeling pretty bullish and optimistic, I wanted us to take a really conservative view on it. That's good.
Yeah. I think that's all. I think that's like perfectly put. I feel like it's important to let people know that you don't have like a damn the torpedoes attitude about this. Like, we're going to get through no matter what. And that you're actually looking at the real numbers. And that's part of what looking at the worst case scenario did for us, is just saying like, we are going to take a concerted effort to look at what this might mean and might look like for NOBL and how we'll get through it. And then we can talk about, okay, but the more likely, like less bad scenario is probably this, and that's what this means for us, etc. So
yep, that's exactly right. And then this was one of my favorite slides. I can't believe we're at the end. That was great. I feel like often when organizations share all the finances, it's great in some ways, but I think it leaves people with some people, right? If they don't own the P&L, or they're not in the manager position of business development, and so can't have real top line impact, they're not really sure what their role to play is. Like, they're not really sure where they could contribute. And that question sort of almost consistently comes up from sharing all this transparency. Because I've been in a position of leadership where I prioritized transparency, and I was so excited, and I would, in past lives, expect this kind of big cheer and galvanized workforce just from sharing the metrics, and then would quickly be kind of disappointed standing at like the front of the room presenting the metrics when there wasn't a kind of like call to arms or a rally that was happening right after. And I think what I realized is the misstep that I had taken was not just delineating what we expected and what was possible for each employee to do. And so that's what this slide, quite a collaborative effort between all the managing directors, was created out of, is that need to say, here's the things that each of you can do. And different individuals will gravitate towards different bullets here, and there's probably more that we didn't include, but this felt, and I love that self-care is first. It just feels like we're really eating our own dog food when it comes to self-care being the first thing.
Yeah. I think this matches our first slide really well. It's like, what are our priorities right now, and what does that mean for you? I think, so if you're going to replicate this or duplicate it and make it your own for your company, I would, imagine like, what behaviors do you want to see from your employees in the next couple months, and start to write those down in this way. And then also, of course, like we always say, make sure that you're modeling them too as a leadership team. So you don't get to say like, this is your part to play, but we're going to do something completely different, because it'll just obviously read really inauthentic. So make sure that the things that you're committing to here are ones that your leadership team is going to do as well.
Yep. Yeah, so I think this speaks for itself to a degree, but I just love this slide. And I think that's it. This was fun.
Yeah. Oh, that was so fun.
I hope this was helpful. I think we also, the other thing I was just thinking about when you said that, Jane, is that this orients towards a small business, and typically our client base is larger businesses. We do work with startups for sure, but mostly, we work in more of the kind of mid-sized scale up or Fortune 1000 space. And some of this won't be applicable if you're sitting at the helm of that big of an organization. That said, it is applicable for departments. So I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. So I would say it's really applicable for any team that's being led. And the metrics that you're transparent about don't necessarily even have to be a full P&L. It could be metrics that have to do with maybe, I don't know, awareness or other types of metrics that you're driving if you're in a marketing org or an HR org or something that's more applicable for your organization. So I think it's just about empowering people to feel like they have a sense of how these decisions are being made. What is what's the dynamic steering really look like?
Totally. Yeah, this is meant to be like a skeleton for you to input the right information and give you a little bit of a framework for how to communicate in a time of uncertainty. So, if you're a CMO or the head of like your digital team or the leader of an organization that's slightly bigger, I think you can adapt this as needed. The key here is helping communicate like, what is the lay of the land, what's everyone's part to play, and what does the company hope to instill in people moving forward.
That's perfectly put.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in.